Penguin Random House Audio presents I Am Maria, my reflections and poems on heartbreak, healing, and finding your way home. This is the author, Maria Shriver. I started trying to write some version of this book more than 20 years ago. I'd start, then stop, then start again. I always ended up putting it down. I wasn't ready. I finally am. On a hilltop in Petaluma, California, I buried the woman who wrote much of what's on these pages, the woman who was tougher than tough. I buried the part of me that was filled with self-loathing, self-criticism, self-hatred, and self-judgment. I buried the combative, angry, controlling version of myself. On that hilltop, I asked for forgiveness from God for the pain I'd caused myself, for the pain I caused others, and for the pain they caused me. That process was extremely emotional and deeply revealing. It was liberating. It has given me a new beginning. I never imagined I would write a book of poetry. I never imagined writing poetry would help me embark on a journey deep into myself. I never imagined that everything I sought or thought I needed was within me all along. What I found in writing poetry is that you never know where it will lead you. But if you remain open, it just might lead you to your own open field. The poetry within these pages comes from the front lines of my life. I've learned that many of the things I write about in these pages are felt by millions of other people, which is what led me to finally think publishing them was a good idea. This is a book about love and longing, loss and liberation, heartache, healing, and hope. It's about finding the light and love within and all around. It's about being in communion with all the different parts of oneself. It's how we mend our hearts and our souls. It's how we find our way home. Ultimately, it's about surrender and salvation, because I've learned that while our paths vary, we're all on a quest of our own. Your quest can help guide mine, and mine can perhaps help guide yours. My hope is that while reading these poems, you will feel there is healing and freedom on the other side of the trauma, the pain, the regret, the judgment you may have experienced or may be experiencing. Freedom from the self you think is you. Freedom from that harsh, dark voice that lives inside so many of us. We all need compassion for ourselves and love for ourselves. We all need to forgive ourselves and accept ourselves. For once all of this is given, healing can arise. Climbing the mountain that is me has been excruciating, grueling, and deeply emotional, but also freeing. It was a climb that only I could do. It's not something one can outsource. And you can do the same if you so choose. There is no doubt in my mind about that. This book is dedicated to all those who are brave enough to make that climb. And it's dedicated to my beloved children, my grandchildren, and my entire family. It's also dedicated to all those who loved me and tried to love me along the way. You know who you are. I see you and I love you. I really do, with my whole heart and soul, until the end of God's time. Love always, Maria. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Rumi, 13th century Persian poet and mystic. Out beyond wrongdoing and right-doing, out beyond fear, expectation, and judgment, out beyond shame, pain, and grief, there's an open field. I'll meet you there. Maria, 2025. Reflections. I am Maria, Believe it or not, it's taken me a lifetime to be able to say that and feel it was enough. That may be somewhat surprising, but stick with me here and I'll try to explain. Searching for the authentic Maria, uncovering, discovering, and recovering her has been a challenge for me all my life. For decades, I couldn't see her because I was looking for myself in all the wrong places. Of course, I didn't know that because I thought I had this self-awareness thing down cold. In fact, in 2000, I published the bestseller 10 Things I Wish I'd Known Before I Went Out into the Real World, because I wanted to share all the lessons I'd learned about love, marriage, kids, and how to navigate your way into a high-powered career. Everything I thought you needed to know if you wanted to have it all in this life, as I thought I did. I was 45 years old at that time, and I ended the book with, "I'll get back to you in 10 years. That's when I just knew I'd be ready to publish a self-congratulatory update on how extraordinarily well I'd done by continuing to apply those same 10 lessons to my own life. In fact, I was sure I'd be able to come up with 10 more pithy bits of hard-earned wisdom about love, marriage, kids, and a career by then. But when I did turn 55 years old, I was in no emotional shape to write a book. In fact, I was barely able to get out of bed. So much for my delusions of self-awareness. Well, now I'm in my 60s, and thank God I'm up and out of bed, standing on my own 2 feet. Getting here hasn't been easy, but I'm grateful to have finally learned some real hard truths about life and about myself that just might be worth passing on. You may be wondering what on earth took me so long to see these truths. Trust me, I've asked myself that question a million times. But I now understand that I couldn't have known these truths until I learned them. And I couldn't have learned them until I lived them. And I couldn't have lived them until I had to. I had to when circumstances forced me to break through my lifelong industrial strength wall of capital D denial, so I could come face to face with the self I had left behind. The self I had buried under a pile of relationships, accomplishments, titles, and false beliefs. No one did that to me. I did it to myself. So under all of the rubble, I had to ask, who was Maria? The beginning of getting some real answers came when I started writing poetry. I've always loved poetry. Years ago, I discovered Mary Oliver's poem, The Journey, and it spoke directly to my soul. When I turned 50, a good friend gave me a copy of Derek Walcott's poem, Love After Love, and I felt like it was written for me and about me. And then I discovered the poet and the mystic Rumi, who talked about that field out beyond wrongdoing and right-doing. Over the years, I'd even taken a stab at writing poetry myself, but I always seemed to just skim the surface of what I was feeling inside. But now, all of a sudden, and to my surprise, in the darkest period of my life, when I sat down and put pen to paper, all the stories I'd been telling myself, all the walls I had built up around myself started to fall away. And what I was actually feeling poured out of me in the form of poems. Now, when many people think of poetry, they think of rhyming couplets or Shakespearean sonnets. I did too, and that made the idea of writing poetry intimidating to me. But once I gave myself the permission to just write down whatever I was feeling, words that were true, that were raw, that made me feel vulnerable, that didn't even have to make sense, I found that poetry was the way for me to express what was buried deep inside. All of a sudden, poetry didn't feel out of reach to me anymore. It didn't have to rhyme. It didn't have to fit into a certain structure. It didn't have to have narrative cohesion. It just had to be true. So true, it often shocked me. As someone who's written several books and countless speeches and essays over the years, I thought I'd already uncovered much of what I wanted or needed to say about my life. But when I discovered poetry, I found a new...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?